Michigan Justice Chronicles with Dan Geherin takes you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes of criminal defense law, uncovering the strategies, stories, and stakes that define justice in Michigan.
Welcome to Michigan Justice Chronicles with Dan Geherin. I'm Tracy Merda, and I'm excited to talk with Dan today about the intersection of criminal and civil litigation. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tracy. Glad to be here.
So Dan, I'm really excited to talk about this topic that we've chosen for today. I think it's incredibly interesting for anyone out there who may be wondering or seeing these cases or might be involved in a case themselves. We're talking about that intersection of criminal and civil litigation. I wanted to start with a discussion on Monroe County Boat Club. I think that was a drug driving case. Dan, you've been a criminal prosecutor, a private criminal defense attorney, and a wrongful death litigator. Can you tell us about this case specifically and your perspective on how boating laws and civil litigation interact?
I can, Tracy. And you talk about one of the saddest cases that Michigan justice has seen in many years. But this past spring, at a birthday party down in Monroe, Michigan, which is about an hour from my office in Ann Arbor, a young boy and his family and friends were having a birthday party of all things. It was a Saturday afternoon, and they had rented a space, an event space near the Monroe County Yacht Club Boat Club. And right in the middle of probably eating cake and having a great time, a woman, 66 years old, was leaving the boat club where allegedly she had been drinking. And she floored her car at full speed directly into the event space, crashed through the walls, and very tragically and sadly killed 2 children and seriously injured 8 other people. And, that case has reverberated in Michigan justice communities. It's something that all of us in the legal community are following very closely. It's not only a tragically sad case and a case that has the attention of the public because of the tragic nature of it, but for someone like me that runs a criminal justice firm that sort of hits on all of these areas: criminal liability, civil liability, wrongful death, injury, catastrophic injury. It's sort of a case study, as sad and tragic as it is, on what we do day in and day out. And there's a lot of lessons for people to learn, legal lessons about that criminal liability, about the civil liability, and I'm happy to talk about both.
Wow. I mean, what a tragic case that, like you said, it just kind of hits all points. What are the criminal charges involved in this case, and what sort of makes them unique?
Yeah, so as expected, the one not unique part of that is that she's charged with operating while intoxicated causing death, or what many states call DUI death or DUI causing death. That's not a surprise. In fact, she's charged with 2 counts of that because she killed 2 children. What's a little bit surprising, but more and more we're seeing this in the justice community, is she's also charged with murder or homicide. Now, when we think of that term, murder, homicide, and we think of datelines and watching news magazine shows and so forth, we think of the classic murder, that someone has premeditated and committed a murder. But there is something in Michigan called second-degree murder, which is unpremeditated murder, and it can be committed where someone commits such a reckless act, such an act of depravity, as we say, that they put the public in such danger that the prosecution can try to charge them with murder. So one of the real unique things about this case, Tracy, is that the woman is charged with murder. Now, in my perspective, usually you need to see something beyond just the drinking and the driving causing death to get to that level. Typically, we see a person with a criminal history, or we see such reckless behavior like drag racing or some sort of conduct on the roads to suggest they were just such a grave risk beyond being drunk. It'll be interesting to see what the prosecutor shows here, but let me say this. When you have dead children and you have alcohol in someone's system, sometimes you see jurors and judges sort of look the other way on the law because they want to convict. There's sort of a thirst to convict, to get justice for those that have been killed or injured. So unique in the charge is the homicide. The other unique thing to keep your eye on is her defense. She has claimed some sort of medical incident where she claims she seized up or possibly was in a seizure or some sort of diabetic issue where she was not in control of her body. Interesting to watch, but I will say from my perspective, having been a prosecutor and done defense work for a number of years, it's a very tough defense when you knowingly drink alcohol and then you put yourself in a car, what tends to happen after is very difficult to say, well, it was a medical condition. So that'll be interesting to watch. But a homicide charge, 2 counts of it, and a unique nature of a defense, we'll be keeping our eyes on that for the criminal element.
Wow. I will have my eyes peeled because I've never heard of a case like this. This is, really unprecedented. What about the civil implications involved in this case? What's unique about them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, anyone that does civil law, whether it be plaintiff's law, wrongful death, injury cases, they're always going to sort of look to see who's liable. And you don't want to be laser focused on that. Obviously, the woman may be liable, the woman driver, right? So the first thing that you're going to look at is, okay, let's go after the driver. But anyone that practices this area will say, who else might have been at fault here? So first and foremost, you're going to have wrongful death actions. The children who perished, their families are going to be what are basically called personal representatives, and they're going to bring wrongful death actions against the driver. But they're also likely going to bring wrongful death actions against the boat club. If that boat club in the restaurant or the bar overserved that woman, there's something called dram shop liability, and they can go after a bar or restaurant for overserving a patron who injures or kills someone. They will probably go after the event space itself. Was there a safety net on where they put the building? Was it right on the roadway? Was there any curb or slowing down of a traffic car in this situation coming barreling towards them? So you can bet they're going to go after the driver, the bar or restaurant, the event space. And last but not least, let's remember the driver had insurance, as did everyone else I've mentioned. So it's not just going after individuals, it's going after their insurance, whether it be automobile insurance, premises liability insurance, or so forth. So that's wrongful death. And then switching over, Tracy, to injury. Every single person who suffered a catastrophic injury will bring suits against everyone I mentioned. So you're likely going to have countless suits brought by countless people against countless defendants, hopefully bringing some justice to the people who suffered injury or who lost 2 children.
I was just going to say, what about, do you see the wrongful death suits coming up for the parents or for anyone who witnessed this? I mean, it had to be a completely tragic event.
No question about it. And I think those wrongful death suits are going to be obviously successful no matter who they go after, whether it be the driver's insurance company, whether it be the event space's premises liability, whether it be the restaurant if they overserved her, and all of the above. And yes, as mentioned, anyone who's part of the victim's family can be a part of, it's not called a class action, it can be basically called the class or a personal representative of the people who are related to those children can seek retribution, can seek compensation for a wrongful death action against those other people, the building, the restaurant, and the driver.
So Dan, does a criminal conviction affect the outcome of a related civil lawsuit?
No question. So if I were on the civil end of things, key here would be to wait to see what happens with the criminal case, right? Because a criminal conviction is going to open a lot of doors in the civil arena. If she's ultimately found guilty and convicted, whether it be for homicide or murder or even OWI causing death, what you've done as a civil litigator is establish liability, at least against her. You've said, okay, now it's clear she is liable. Not that there's much doubt about that anyway. And then it's just a matter of damages and going after the right pockets to make sure you get those damages. So if there's a conviction, that can be of great help to the civil litigants in this case. Almost always when we're handling a case and civil in nature, there's a criminal case, you want to wait for the criminal case to play out for that reason, amongst others. The civil litigants are going to sit back and watch, see what happens in the criminal case, learn from the criminal trial, perhaps get information from the accident reconstructionist, from the police. Maybe this woman testifies and they can listen in on that and hone in their civil case against her. And then if she testifies what she drank, was she overserved? Can they then add that into their cause of action against the restaurant or the bar? So yes, a criminal case and conviction can certainly help and aid a civil case. And the flip side is probably true, too. If for some reason she was found not guilty in the criminal case, it might affect the civil case in terms of settlements. Maybe it doesn't embolden the plaintiff's attorneys as much. Maybe it gives defenses to some of the defendants in the civil case. So almost all civil litigation where there's a criminal case, almost universally, you wait until the criminal case is over, and then that will open up some avenues in civil litigation.
Wow. Yeah, like you said, exciting to see and watch all of this happen. Now, when you represent people in civil or criminal cases where there's this sort of parallel criminal suit, what is the goal and how do you best position them?
That's a really great question. It's tough to answer. So I'll take it in two ways. If you're representing someone in a civil case, let's say I was representing the parents of the child who was killed in this instance. Obviously, you want to make sure that their objectives are fulfilled. So if their objectives are, we want to be compensated for our pain and suffering and of course, the loss of our child, we want laws to be changed to make sure that there are safeguards placed on this road. We want bars to be shut down and sued if they overserved it. Then you try to make sure you accomplish each of those goals. That's sort of seeking justice for those plaintiffs in a civil case. And you also, as mentioned before, want to monitor the criminal case, learn what you can from it, and hopefully profit from a conviction, as I predict will occur here. Let's flip that. If I'm representing the defendant in this case, then obviously I'm telling her you have grave concerns, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, but you also could be bankrupt by various entities coming after you and your insurance company. And let's be careful here on what you say, who you say it to. The classic example is if you're going to enter a plea bargain, you have to do what is called a no contest plea. You don't want your client admitting guilt if you're representing them in a criminal case and there's a parallel civil case. So really good question, because when there's this intersection of criminal and civil, while there's usually different attorneys, everyone has to keep their eye on the prize, who your client is, what their objectives are, but mindful of the other case that's sort of brewing in the corner at the same time.
Well, this is sort of an interesting question I'm going to hit you with. How do these cases differ for you, and what do you sort of like best about each or find the most challenging?
Yeah, you know what? I'm sort of a criminal practitioner at heart. I started as a prosecutor 100 million years ago, and I've always had criminal as part of my practice and part of my lifestyle and part of my veins. And so I tend to enjoy the criminal aspect of charges, whether it's defending someone charged with a crime or helping a victim in a crime or that type of thing. But civil cases are also, I would say, enjoyable is probably the closest word I can, but very meaningful too, because oftentimes you're dealing with, families whose loved ones have passed away or are injured, and they are just obviously wrecked, and you're trying to sort of build them up while you're trying to give them hope as to what the outcome might be. So I would say I enjoy anything with a criminal element more, but handling civil litigation, especially when there's a criminal act on the other end, and you can go after that actor, you can go after that restaurant, you can go after anyone that's made mistakes, that's caused lives, that's certainly of interest to us as well.
Absolutely. Well, just sort of wrapping things up here, you mentioned a few things to watch with this particular case. Is there anything that, you'd like to make voters think about, or, any civil, litigation that you see or can avoid? And what's sort of your advice to, our fellow Michiganites who are out there?
Yeah, I think there's so many campaigns out there about not drinking and driving. Everyone has seen the wreckage that people can cause. Everyone knows don't have more than a drink or so to get behind the wheel. So I'm not going to make any public service announcements there that are going to matter. But, if bars are going to overserve people, they need to be held obviously responsible. And if this bar here, I'm not saying they did, if this restaurant overserved this person and put her on the road at twice the legal limit and it caused death and destruction, that bar needs to pay through the teeth, for lack of a better phrase. And then obviously event spaces need to be careful about where they're placing, parties, things like that. But on a grand scheme, I'd say, this is a classic example how tragedy can strike anywhere, anytime. A Saturday afternoon at a birthday party, lives are changed. And this sort of, as a criminal justice attorney in Michigan, is what we see, and we sort of unravel the pieces of it. It's not for everybody, but it's certainly what we do. It's certainly what I'm intrigued by in this case. As sad and tragic as it is a gentle reminder that life can change in an instant, and the people that never expected to can be brought into the Michigan justice system overnight, essentially.
Very good, Dan. It's really been a pleasure. And thanks, everyone, for tuning into Michigan Justice Chronicles with attorney Dan Geherin. For more information or to connect with Dan, you can visit glgmichigan.com or find him on social media. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a comment. Thanks so much, Dan.
Thanks, Tracy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.